This is the groove that I have prepared. When I have a groove like this prepared that already sounds quite full on its own, before trying to write a bass line or a melody, I like to establish a nice melodic floor or pad sound that already puts me into some kind of an emotional state before thinking about what kind of melody or MIDI I would like to draw in. And in most cases, I go for Omnisphere. I have a few examples prepared here just so you know what exactly it is that I'm aiming for. So example number 1, I'm just going to hit the C note on my keyboard. Let's hit play with the groove. You know what I mean now? When you have a sound like this, it sparks something in you and you want to write a melody, you want to add a vocal on top, a bass line perhaps. Or example number 2 is this one here. Like it establishes already some character and emotion to your track. And if you're looking for a new synthesizer and you have the extra money, then maybe this video will make it easier for you to choose which synth to buy, and perhaps Omnisphere might fall into that category. All right, so what I'm gonna do is just load up a new MIDI track over here, and I'll just record arm it from the start, dial it down a bit. And in this MIDI track, I'm going to load up Omnisphere. And I have a low cut enabled by default, which we can pull down to 30 Hertz because we don't want that much sub in here. And now if I hit the note C on my MIDI keyboard, we're getting a saw wave, a default saw wave. You can see that oscillator A or layer A is now enabled. It's the only layer that is currently on. And what I mostly go for is sample. You can then click into this empty space and choose a variety of different samples. Like you get a ton. And when I say a ton, that's an understatement. You get so many freaking sounds, it's unbelievable. And you can also import your own audio samples here where it says user audio, which is also fantastic. But in this case, I want to go for a pad sound, so an atmospheric texture. So what I'll do is go for textures. I usually go for dreamlike, floating, hopeful. Test yourself out here. And then you can just scroll through these individual presets. I'm going to select one of these random ones. Now this one says abandoned, but I don't feel like it's abandoned. I feel like it's actually kind of hopeful. These all have their own little character to them. Very beautiful. Anytime you feel like importing your own sound, you can just go back into the layer that you want to edit. For example, layer A. Click this folder icon and you already see this panel here where it says user audio. So what I'm going to do is just go through one of my packs here. Maybe go for some kind of ambient swell. Like this, and just drag and drop. And then it says, okay, it's successfully imported it. Just click OK. And here you can see all of the user sounds. As a matter of fact, I already have a couple of ambient soundscapes loaded in here. These are a couple of my own sounds that I created in Contact. So I'm essentially importing sounds from Contact into Omnisphere, which is kind of cool. Beautiful. And if you don't feel like using your own sound, you can just go here in the top left corner, directory, all, and it shows you every sound that you have imported in Omnisphere, including the user sounds. So let's go back into textures and dreamlike and go for one of these textures here. And I highly recommend playing the pad with the rest of your groove so you know how it sounds. I think this one's actually kind of beautiful. Once I've selected a sound that I like, you can close Omnisphere, highlight the section that you want to edit, and then hit Command-Shift-M to create a MIDI clip, and select the note that you'd like to play. In this case, I'd like to go for C. So let's see how this sounds. Okay, that might be a bit too low, so let's pitch it up an octave, hit Shift arrow up. That's fine. Let's hit legato, so we basically drag the note to the end. This sound is lovely. and I could keep it this way. But if I feel like tweaking it a bit more and adding even more of a unique touch to it, what I do is I go back into Omnisphere and I start modulating so I can create movement over time. And what makes Omnisphere so unique is that you get an additional option to modulate using this orb. In Ableton Live, you also have an orb here, but this is more of an XY panel, because you only get to map two parameters, to the x-axis and the y-axis. In this orb in Omnisphere, you can map as many parameters as you'd like, and you also get this randomize function, which is called dice in this case. So what you could do is just enable the orb and hit play. If you enable inertia and attractor and give it a slight nudge, like this, it starts moving pretty chaotically. And you can already see there's some movement in the sound. Some panning. I think there's some chorus here as well. And if you feel like randomizing the parameters, just hit dice. And it'll give you a different set of effects. Click dice a couple times, so now it's a bit crusher. You could also decrease the depth so you make that effect less intense. Pretty cool. As far as I know, inertia is more of a chaotic movement and attractor is more of a subtle, smooth movement. So you can just test these out. What we can do is go into the effects panel and add a few effects in the comments section. The ones that I like using the most are the creative effects inner space. So if we hit play on the pad, and let's add a few impulse responses as far as I know. These are like reverb presets. Symbolscape is always quite nice. Yeah, and then you can modulate the mix. Right click, modulate with orb. So now you see this panel opens up. And whenever you move the orb, you basically get more of that dry wet signal of the reverb. You see the target here. And we can gradually add more movement to the sound this way. Let's go back into A. That's kind of cool. You can also see it here and it's moving on its own right now. Oh, now it just stopped. Now, another thing that you can do is add harmonics to the sound. So basically notes on top of the note that's already playing. Therefore, you just go into the Harmonia Engine here, enable it. You can see which notes you can enable. So let's enable our 3 layers here. +7 is a perfect fifth, which always fits quite well harmonically. +12 is an octave, which is basically the same note. So C just pitched up 1 octave above. So C2, C3, it's the same note, and 1 octave below. Now, if we play the sound from the beginning, we can mix these individual oscillators or voices in. Before, after. You see? So it becomes a bit more harmonically rich. And now what if we modulate this mix with the orb as well? So we gradually introduce more harmonics and then take them out. We gradually introduce more notes and then take them back out. So we get more movement in the sound. And if you like, you can also modulate the individual notes here. So let's go back into the orb. Start adding a bit more movement ourselves. And on this right panel, you see how much is always being applied. And if you feel like adding a bit more, you can just increase the source here, the modulation amount here. Subtle movement like this is what makes the sound truly beautiful. If we go into effects, we can continue adding more effects. Like Foreman filter. This could be really interesting as well. So let's modulate this with the orb. maybe less. You can also modulate these individual parameters with the orb. And maybe add another filter. So modulate the mix with the orb. Now if we move our orb, you get gradual motion in time. So you can then just make it move on its own a bit here. Slowly and gradually. And little by little, you can enable new oscillators, like oscillator B or layer B, and add a completely new sample on top. Nice. And perhaps this sound, you want to filter it down a bit by enabling the filter. You see it's set to low pass right now. So what we could do is just right click our cutoff, modulate this with the orb. Maybe a bit more. Go back into orb. So you see now we're getting a bit more texture and movement in our sound. Beautiful. You can enable individual oscillators like this and keep on adding new texture sounds on top. Crazy. Maybe even Foley sound like this can be equally as beautiful. You can select a completely different type of filter, like a bandpass for this example. So basically a filter that looks like this, you know. If I would to demonstrate it with an EQ, a bandpass looks like this. So it just focuses or narrows down on a certain frequency. So yeah, so this sound is only audible at the beginning because it's a one-shot. However, if we want to have a more textural and long sound, so let's keep on looking, maybe in a different folder. Let's just go back into textures and see exuberant, what we have here. Okay, so this one's also very subtle. Let's enable the filter. Right-click, modulate with orb. A bit more amount. Back into orb. What you can also do is record in a motion pattern. And what I usually like doing is setting it to 1 or 2 bars. In this case, 2 bars. Hit record, play. And it'll record us 2 bars of motion, and then it plays back that motion that we just drew in. I could clear and just record until we get a setting that we like, maybe a more smooth movement. And if you still don't like it, just hit clear and make it move on its own. Just have to swing it a bit. So with the rest of the groove, this sounds like this. Now you just need to mix it in. Maybe add a bit of low cut EQ. So I take away some of the peaks here. Clean up the sound, or alternatively, we could also use a soothe, which does the peak reduction dynamically. Yeah, putting it on hard and giving it a lot of depth takes away most of the sound's character. So you can't really recognize the original sound. However, you get a lot of space for other elements in the mix. So if you don't want the pad to be as dominant, put your soothe onto hard and give it a lot of depth. And if you want, you can also automate this depth. Yeah, and if you're happy with the preset, you can just duplicate the entire Omnisphere layer, record arm the new layer, and perhaps you could go for a completely different type of sound. So you just start disabling the individual layers, go for layer A, and maybe you could go for a one-shot type of sound. So one shot, maybe chord. Right? And you start getting song ideas. And if you're happy with this particular layer, you can just duplicate it. And I'm going to solo it. Go to layer A, click on the folder, sound match. So give us similar sounds and match current selection. So it's going to search for similar sounds to the piano one shot that we have loaded up previously. And you get a lot of these little ear candy fills for your track. Even if it's really weird and textural, it might also make sense to drop that in your track as well. Sounds like that are what fill out the space or the emptiness melodically in your tracks. And then you can just place your sounds. If you have one shots, it probably makes sense to shorten down the MIDI clip as well. If you have longer texture sounds, then it makes sense to play those to the very end. In this case, layer 2 and layer 3 are one shots, so we can label them accordingly. One shot, and then start placing our MIDI. You see, and then you can fill out your track. By duplicating, going layer by layer, adding some movement with the orb, you get really, really unique soundscapes or even melodic ear candy. And if I feel like I get a sound that I really enjoy, what you can do is just right-click the layers that you want to freeze and click freeze and flatten. It'll just take a moment to convert that to audio. And once you convert it to audio, you don't need all those unnecessary plugins. You have just the simple audio. And in my opinion, you get a slightly better overview of the sound and where it plays. You can also do that for the original Omnisphere layer. Just freeze and flatten the track. There we go. And then you get your entire pad sound. Okay, this one I feel like still has a lot of bass. So I'm going to take it out by adding an EQ8. And on some of these layers, we can also apply our own effects that we have on our sends and returns. On A, I have an Echo Boy Jr. delay. On B, I have a black hole reverb. So this is how it sounds. Maybe we can reverse the sound. Place it here, reverse it. Yeah, just go crazy. Maybe pitch it down an octave here. Or +7, which always works well. Just place your sounds randomly, go crazy, and have some fun here. Reverse them by hitting R. Add some fades. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. So Omnisphere gives you a lot of sounds to choose from. Before we had the pads, the groove sounded pretty stale. But now we have an entire soundscape to work with after. And this is honestly what makes me feel inspired to add some kind of a melody on top, or a bass groove, or get into the nitty-gritty MIDI, the editing of the MIDI notes. And honestly, I feel kind of inspired to add a bassline, so I'm going to add a new MIDI track here, color this red. We're already using Omnisphere, so I might as well use Omnisphere again. The hardware library here, which is also included in the base version of Omnisphere, so you're getting all these different hardware synths. And we could just use a bass, so let's go search up a synth bass here. Go for some kind of bass and maybe add a sting. We're in the key of C, so we can leave this on C, decrease the density perhaps, add a few octaves above, put it here, and then select our bass preset. Randomize it a bit. There we go. Or just scroll through presets until you find something that you like. In this case, I feel like this one sounds kind of good. Don't need to leave in the highs, just take out the highs if you don't like them. And you got yourself a really happy sounding organic house groove. You can also sidechain it to the kick. Mono it. There we go. You can clip the MIDI as well. Hit tab, drag the MIDI sequence here. So you can disable the sting, yeah. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. It does help me grow. And if you like these sounds, grab them on LotusTunes.com. I'll also make this particular project file available on my Patreon page if you enjoy the results of today's video. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace.